Coffee grows cold on the kitchen table. Morning news plays to an empty room. Detective's badge feels heavier today. Another case, another life consumed.
Welcome back to MJ on Crime. I am your host, MJ. All right, folks, let's get right into it. Why would anyone, especially someone innocent, confess to a crime they didn't commit? I mean, on the surface, it sounds nuts, right? But after 3 decades in law enforcement and my true crime research and writing journey, I can tell you it happens more than you'd think. And it's not just about the cops or the system. There's a whole psychological storm going on in that interrogation room. Let's break it down. There are several primary types of false confessions. You got your voluntary ones, people who, for whatever reason, walk in and say, yeah, I did it, even when they didn't. Sometimes it's for attention, sometimes to protect someone else, sometimes because of mental health issues. Then you got coerced, compliant confessions. This is where someone's under so much pressure, they just want the whole nightmare to end. They'll say whatever the interrogator wants to get out of that room, and then there's coerced, internalized confessions. This is the wildest one, where someone actually starts to believe they did it, even if they have no memory of the crime. Now, Dr. Saul Kassan, he's done a ton of research on this, talks about how stress, fatigue, and suggestibility play a huge role. You keep someone up all night, hammer them with questions, tell them you've got evidence, even if you don't, and eventually their mind starts to crack, especially if they're young or they've got mental health issues or they're just really eager to please. Mental health experts say people who are anxious, compliant, or just plain exhausted are way more likely to give a false confession. And here's the kicker. Sometimes the innocent are the most vulnerable. They think of, I've got nothing to hide. I'll just talk and this will all get sorted out. But that's not how it always goes. The psychology of it is deep, and it's not just about good guys and bad guys. It's about what happens in the person's mind when the pressure's on and the walls start closing in. So, let's talk about the environment, the social and situational stuff that pushes people over the edge. Interrogation rooms aren't exactly cozy. You're isolated, you're tired, you're scared, and then you got these high-pressure tactics, like the Reid technique. That's the one where the interrogator comes in, already convinced you're guilty, and the whole thing is about breaking you down. They'll confront you, cut off your denials, maybe even lie about the evidence. In the U.S., cops are allowed to do that, to use a ruse. A ruse is fair game. Isolation is a big one. You're cut off from family, friends, and anyone who might have your back. That sense of being alone, it's powerful. Add in intimidation, maybe a promise of leniency. Just tell us what happened, and you can go home. And you start to see how someone could cave, especially if they're young or inexperienced. Let me give you a real case. Jeffrey Deskovich, 16 years old, high school kid, gets pulled in for questioning about a murder. He's grilled for hours. No lawyer, no parent, just him and the detectives. Eventually, he confesses. Later, DNA clears him, but by then, he's already lost years of his life, and there are many other cases. And it's not just about the tactics, it's about the mindset. If you're sitting there thinking, they've got all this evidence, I'm never getting out of here, you might start to believe it yourself. That's how powerful these social and situational pressures can be. Now let's talk about what happens after the confession, because once you say those words, I did it, it's like a boulder rolling downhill. The Innocence Project has found that nearly 30% of DNA-based exonerations involve false confessions. That's not a small number. That's hundreds of people, maybe more, who lost years, sometimes decades, because of a confession that wasn't true. And here's the real gut punch. When the innocent confess, the real perpetrator walks free. Sometimes the system locks onto that confession, and everything else gets ignored. Evidence that doesn't fit, it gets explained away. Alibis, they're dismissed. The confession becomes the story. Take Brendan Dassey from Making a Murderer, the Netflix true crime series. Brendan was 16 with learning disabilities, hours of questioning, and no lawyer. He confesses, but some say the details didn't add up. Still, that confession swayed the jury. Even when the evidence was shaky, the words "I did it" carried more weight than anything else. And that's the danger. Once a confession's in play, it's almost impossible to walk it back. I've seen it in courtrooms, too. Juries hear a confession, and it's game over. Even if they are aware of the pressure and the tactics, it's still hard to shake the idea that someone would admit to something they didn't do. But the stats and the stories say otherwise. So, what's supposed to protect people from this? Well, you've got Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. But here's the thing. A lot of people, especially the innocent, waive those rights. They think, I've got nothing to hide. But that's when they're most vulnerable. Having a lawyer in the room makes a huge difference. It's a safeguard, a buffer against the pressure, but too often suspects go it alone, and when interrogations aren't recorded, it's their word against the detectives. That's why recording interrogations, start to finish, is so important. It keeps everyone honest. It's not just about catching bad cops. It's about making sure the process is fair. Best practices, law enforcement needs training. Real training on psychological vulnerabilities. Not everyone reacts the same way under pressure. Some people are more suggestible, more likely to comply. Ethical interrogation techniques, transparency, and accountability. Those are the keys to minimizing wrongful confessions. And honestly, it's better for everyone. The goal is to get the truth, not just a confession. So, how do we stop this from happening? First off, make video recording of all interrogations mandatory. No exceptions. That way, there's an objective record. No he said, she said. It protects the suspect, and it protects the cops too. Next, law enforcement needs to be trained in ethical interrogation techniques. That means recognizing when someone's vulnerable, whether it's because of age, mental health, or just the stress of the situation, and avoiding tactics that cross the line into coercion. It's not about tricking people. It's about finding the truth. And there's got to be oversight. Conduct an independent, expert review of interrogation procedures to identify patterns of misconduct and intervene when something's not right. It's not about blaming. It's about making sure the system works the way it's supposed to. And remember, the majority of confessions are from the guilty, but one false confession is too many. We've seen too many cases where a confession was the only thing tying someone to a crime. If we want justice, we need to ensure that those confessions are genuine, and that means changing how we do things from the ground up. Verify, does this confession make sense? Is there any corroborating evidence to support the confession? Avoid tunnel vision. But let's not stop at the interrogation room. We need to get better at spotting the signs of psychological pressure during and after an interrogation. Forensic and behavioral analysis can help us determine when someone has been pushed too far or when a confession doesn't add up. Standardized protocols are key. That means every department, every detective follows the same rules. Psychological assessments, limits on how long someone can be questioned, clear guidelines on what's allowed and what's not, prevent the wild, wild west. And we can't forget about the community. Advocacy programs, both for victims and for those wrongfully accused, are crucial. Raising awareness, supporting prevention, and making sure people know their rights. The more the public understands about false confessions, the less likely they are to slip through the cracks. All right, that's where I'll leave it for today. False confessions aren't just a legal problem, they're a human problem. If we want a justice system that delivers justice, we must tackle this head on. Thanks for listening, and stick around. There's always another story to tell. Remember, every crime has a story. My mission, tell it.
Coffee grows cold on the kitchen table. Morning news place to an empty room. Detective's badge feels heavier today. Another case, another life consumed. Questions pile up like autumn leaves, no wind to blow them all away. Who holds the weight of truth when lies run deeper than roots? Family photos sliding in the man's straight. Faces high were legs beneath. Evidence bags in yellow tape mark the boundary between love and grief. Questions pile up like autumn leaves, no wind to blow them all away. Who holds the weight of truth when lies run deeper than roots? Deeper than roots. Small town silence speaks volumes behind closed doors and drawn curtains. Every neighbor becomes suspect when trust breaks like glass on pavement. Someone's world just changed forever, forever changed.